All right, good morning, everyone. Hope you're doing well. My name is Bob Tremblay, Superintendent of Schools, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our first installment of these back to school updates that are live. Before we get into the details, I'd like to introduce our interpreters and explain how the interpretation works. When we turn on the interpretation functionality, those who've joined the Zoom call here will be able to click on the globe at the bottom of the Zoom screen and choose either Spanish or Portuguese. Once you've done that, you'll hear the presentation in the language of your preference. Juliani, can you please introduce yourself and guide our Portuguese-speaking families through the process? And then following that, Mauricio, could you do the same in Spanish?
Oi, bom dia, meu nome é Juliane, eu sou intérprete para as escolas de Framingham. O jeito que vai acontecer, nós, conforme o Dr. Tremblay estiver falando, eu vou estar fazendo a interpretação do que for feito. Se você estiver usando o Zoom, vai ter um globo, a parte inferior do Zoom, para você poder estar clicando e também escolhendo a sua língua. Então, se você quiser simplesmente ouvir tudo que o Dr. Tremblay estiver falando em português, você pode clicar no globo e escolher o idioma de português. E isso tudo vai estar sendo gravado.
Muy buenos días, yo soy Mauricio Perea. Voy a ser su intérprete hoy en español para esta conferencia que va a dar el Dr. Tremblay. Si ustedes están en Zoom, abajo en la pantalla van a encontrar una opción para que puedan recibir esta interpretación en español. Entonces, esta interpretación va a ser para ustedes separada en español, y la cual la pueden también, va a ser grabado para Facebook. Entonces, esperamos su atención y gracias.
And to give our interpreters a quick snapshot of who's here on Zoom today, we're going to launch a language indicator poll. If you're participating in today's event in Spanish or Portuguese, please indicate that now. This poll is anonymous.
Além disso, nós iremos estar criando uma série de perguntas que, se você está aqui no Zoom e você está falando você fala português, você pode escolher a sua preferência de linguagem para que a gente possa saber quais são as línguas que estão aqui hoje.
También vamos a tener una encuesta en la cual pueden poner en qué idioma nos están escuchando para darle seguimiento a estos números y poder estar más pendiente de sus necesidades.
Okay. Thanks for your patience with us as we do this for the first time here.
Gracias por su paciencia.
Obrigado pela sua paciência. É a primeira vez que nós estamos fazendo isso aqui.
So we're going to turn on the interpretation function now.
Nesse momento, nós vamos estar ligando a fase de intérprete.
Entonces nos salimos de esta pantalla para que nos encuentren en la parte donde vamos a hacer sus intérpretes. Gracias.
As we begin, I want to remind everyone watching that this session is being recorded on Zoom. It can be posted to YouTube following the event. It's also being aired on Facebook Live and will be available for viewing after the event has ended. I'll provide some information up front and answer some questions that have been sent to me. I'll also address any new questions at the end.
Todo esto va a ser transmitido por Facebook y ustedes pueden hacer las preguntas pertinentes.
But as your questions come up, please type them into the chat in the language of preference. Behind the scenes, those questions are being added and translated, if applicable, in Google Docs so that I can address them verbally. We're also going to publish these Q&As to the website after the session ends. Questions, by the way, are posted on the chat, are only visible to me. Our moderator and the interpreters and other attendees will not see them. Questions can also be posted in the Facebook comments, and then we will provide the answers with real-time translation. So we're going to go until 11:30. We may end sooner if there's no questions, but we'll try to keep these to 1 hour. So we can get started now. You may have seen this presentation already at the school committee meeting, but I thought it would be a good frame for us to begin. And so this is intended to be a chance for me to connect with our community very informally, casually, and just to let you know what I know as I have the information available to me. I want to start by hoping that you're all doing well and in managing this as best you can. It's certainly an interesting time in our world, and the information about COVID-19 and how our economy is reopening and how our schools are expected to reopen continues to change literally every day. And so I'm hoping that this presentation each week will help to keep you informed. So I want to say that, you know, from last spring, we left school, as you know, in March, and we were in what I would call an area of crisis learning, and just trying to manage as best we could in the time out of school, thinking we might be back in a couple of days at the time. And that expanded, of course, to weeks and then to months. And here we are left with how to proceed going forward with so many changes happening. And so what we're working from is the development of a plan that we have to submit to the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So I want to frame today by what the expectations are, what schools are being asked to do, what schools are doing, and whether that and how that may be received in the community, and trying to get as much feedback as we can. So we're developing the back to school plan with a number of stakeholders. You know, we've not really engaged the parent community in the process, largely because we're taking our lead from the state, from the Department of Elementary Secondary Education, from our commissioner, who we'll have a call with later this morning, actually, and likely we'll have more updates for the 4 p.m. Presentation this afternoon. We're going to continue to revise this as we go, and I'll walk you through the way this is going to be laid out each week. I'm not going to have these slides that I'm sharing with you that you can read on your own. I'm not going to read them all to you, but we're going to follow the format of these 6 elements of the back to school plan that I think we can provide updates that fall fairly neatly into those categories. So let me just first say, this is a work in progress, and I'm just going to ask everyone to be patient. You know, the idea of this communication took us some time to come to, and providing real-time interpretation to give accessibility to our families is a first step. We know it's not going to be perfect for everyone's schedule. 10:30 is probably not ideal for people who are working, and neither is 4 o'clock for that matter, but it's a start. And so at a subsequent event, I'll be asking for your feedback as well as to what time might make sense. Maybe it's later in the evening, maybe it's earlier in the morning prior to going to work. I want to make this as accessible as possible and as informative as possible, and just ask for your patience as we try to make this right. This is in my view, a huge step toward two-way community engagement. As you'll see, I'm going to leave sufficient time, I hope, each session that allows for more questions and answers and less about me presenting. So the presentation aspect of this should only be about 15 to 20 minutes. I'll move really quickly because some of you may have already seen this from the school committee meeting. And so again, bottom line up front, you know, so we're not kind of guessing what's going to be happening. It's a work in progress, number one. Number two is that based on our last school committee meeting, we've been looking at these various models. The model that we're looking at right now, again, that could change later today, but the model that we're looking at right now is a hybrid model that would have some number of students coming to school in person and some number of students working remotely from home, learning remotely from home. And the question is when that process begins. So the state has been pressing for a full return to school. All students coming back is to the extent that we can accommodate that. With a provision, as you'll see in the slide deck, of, you know, we're operating from the 6-foot mindset. Everywhere we go in the world, it's the 6-foot model. In education, though, there seems to be an exemption for 3 feet. And we're not entirely comfortable with that approach, frankly. And so the approach for us in working with our Board of Health, with Dr. Wong, our Director of Public Health, is to be a bit more erring on the side of safety, as it were, and making sure that whatever we're able to do, we're able to do safely. That's the end of this. We want teaching and learning to be effective. We want our students to advance their learning and not be in this cycle of continuing to relearn what's been taught already. That worked in this crisis mode of learning. To some extent, it worked. A lot of students for whom this did not work, frankly. And so we're in a tough spot of having to try to move the curriculum forward. At the same time as understanding that we can't do that in our ideal format, which would be to have every student back in class, every teacher back in class. But is it safe to do that? And the data continues to evolve. And so right now, the plan is a hybrid model, likely with a staggered return. What that would mean is, say, in the first part of the school year, we would be working fully remotely. And how that looks for teachers exactly, I mean, for students, we know that remote means learning from home. And for teachers, that may or may not mean teaching from home or teaching from a classroom. We need to work that out, because at the same time, we're working to help support our families. We're trying to work and help support, keep our teachers safe and our administrators safe as well. But the hybrid model is what we're looking at as the full return. Some districts you may be hearing are thinking about a full return back in person. And depending on how a community, the demographics in terms of the numbers, that may be possible. For example, if you had a very small school district and a declining enrollment in that school district, you may be able to make the case to bring all students back with some, we're calling aspirational 6-foot distance, the ideal, understanding that it could be somewhere between 3 and 6 feet. And so districts may be able to do that. So you're going to find, unlike what we saw with the initial closure, was districts were told by the governor or told by the commissioner, you're going to close for a set period of time. As we begin to reopen, superintendents were hoping for that same kind of directive. So there would be consistency from district to district. And that's not quite happening that way, because every community is in a different place as to whether or not they can actually reopen their buildings and accommodate the student population. Given our nearly 10,000 students in Framingham and the square footage to make it safe for everybody, that's just not possible based on our assessment of using a 6-foot guide. Even the 3-foot rule, which would be far riskier in my view, would still be a complication for us to get all of our students back. I mean, that's ultimately the goal. It's just when. And so we're committed to this 6-foot rule, as I mentioned in number 3. And number 4 is that what we're trying to do is to maintain the level of transportation that we've been able to provide. But that may be problematic. So if we're still, as of this webinar, we're still waiting on specific transportation guidance. I've seen it range from 50% bus capacity to 1/3 bus capacity. And those numbers are significant. And what that could mean is adding, for example, if we had to operate on a 1/3 capacity rule for transportation, that might mean adding 150 plus buses to the Framingham. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine. First of all, we did the best we could to get the 76 buses that we have to school on time, and we didn't do a great job with that. And so adding 150 more, even if they were available, even if we had drivers, I can't imagine the impact, the traffic in the city of Framingham, with adding that many buses to the flow. It's just not attainable for us. It's not a realistic goal. So we have to go back and say, how can we make this work where we can provide transportation for our children, at least the transportation that they're allowed under the law. That's the priority. And so that's what these restrictions mean. But the goal here is to provide transportation as we have in the past. And the practice in Framingham has been, although there's a fee structure to that, has been more generous than the state law requires. That's our goal, but whether or not we can actually do that. And so some sort of a hybrid model may allow for us to be able to accommodate transportation in that regard. And so this is what we're looking at. I'm going to move through the slide deck here. I promised you I wouldn't take so much time talking, and I've already taken a lot of time talking. So the areas of elements that we've looked at are broken into these elements. The first of which is school physical operations. There's been a lot of conversation again on school meals and where that can happen. So we're looking at how to solve that problem. Because if you were to have students in a cafeteria and You'd have to have your mask off to eat, which means you have to have 6-foot distance in order to do that. You'd have only so much capacity at each table, and you'd have lines probably wrapping around the school if we had all of our students back. So are we going to be eating in classrooms? We're going to be using cafeterias. We'll be using additional space available in our schools to accommodate meals. That's a work in progress. We don't have specific guidance yet on that. So when they say work in progress, to be clear, this shouldn't be viewed as we haven't gotten there yet. We're taking all these matters on. We've been doing this since March. We've been revisiting this topic, every single day, as many of you have, and I know you want answers, so we're trying our best to get those. We have to balance, though, the directive from the state and what locally we can actually do. So if the directive is to do one thing, the Board of Health and the school committee and our administration will have to contemplate whether or not we can do what's being asked realistically and safely. And that's important, because with all of these decisions come financial impacts. There come the need for bargaining with various bargaining units. So there's a lot of nuance to this work, to be sure. Transportation, I mentioned already. Physical layout of classroom furniture, you might be hearing the distancing. The way that's measured, just for your own information, is seat edge to seat edge, and that distance being 3 feet. So what we're hearing is that 6 feet is aspirational. That's the goal, understanding that 3 feet is okay. What I'm not clear on, and this may not be the opinion of everybody, certainly, but what I'm not clear on is this seems to be the only arena where 3 feet seems to be an acceptable social distance is in education, and I'm not sure I understand that entirely. So we need to figure out why that is, and so our position has been to lean toward the 6-foot rule, and that has the support. That's of our Board of Health as well. School safety operations is another area. We're looking at the public health accommodations, how we're cleaning our buildings, sanitizing requirements around there, providing supplies. So we have procured supplies. We do ask the students and staff bring their own face coverings. We have a generous donation from the Disability Commission of some masks, some face coverings that are clear in the front. So students lips can be seen, particularly students who need those for, people who need to lip read or any kinds of accommodations. So this will prove helpful, but we also have PPE, personal protective equipment, for families or for students who come to school who have not brought that with them. The requirement, as you may know, is grade 2 up. So anyone from grade 2 into including staff would have to wear a face covering during the day with time for mask breaks. We're imposing the kindergarten and first grade requirement as well. That's recommended, although not required. But again, it goes back to what's good practice for grade 2 seems to be probably good practice for kindergarten and first grade, in my view, as well. So we will be requiring face coverings for everyone in our schools, understanding there's going to be times where the covering will have to be taken off to eat, and there certainly need to be breaks built into the day to accommodate that. There's details here in the school safety operations slide that I'm showing you that are a work in progress, again, because until we know the exact model of school, and the timing of this, by the way, is in the next couple of weeks. So next school committee meeting on June 29th, we'll be talking with July 29th, we'll be talking with the school committee about our proposed plan. We have to present 3 options to the state. Again, I mentioned the full remote, full in-person, or a hybrid, and then with a preference as to which one of those would work best in our community, which again would be our proposal would be the hybrid model. So this will be discussed. Ultimately, this plan is due to the state by August 10th. So we're working within that time frame. We've been asked, so you're aware, the state has asked superintendents not to come out specifically with their plan until early August. So while this seems like it's late getting to our community for a conversation, we're actually a few weeks ahead of schedule in terms of releasing that. So this webinar is not my saying definitively this is the plan. This is what the proposal will be to the school committee and to the Board of Health at their upcoming meeting. I just wanted, again, to keep our community informed on that. Procedures for visitors and meetings, this is not going to look much different than what you'd experience now. When you go out for an appointment, you'd call ahead, you'd schedule when you arrive, you'd let them know that you're there, and so forth. So all these details will be forthcoming. This slide deck is just a guide, but there is last check was 55-page document that highlights all of these various pieces to the reopening plan. The social emotional needs of our families, of our kids, is really a priority here. It continues to be, especially when our students have been out of school for so long and have maybe been in quarantine for that whole time. Those adjustments, coming back, making friends, reacquainting. There's going to be a shift. I mean, if any of you have experienced that, if you've been in quarantine yourself, or just taking those precautions to be voluntarily in quarantine in your house, you know how strange it can feel to go out and actually have a live conversation with someone. And so imagine in a school setting, there's relearning to do. There's trauma from this that has to be addressed. There's lots that's happened in our world since March. And so the social emotional needs of our students is going to continue to be a priority for us, just to make sure that's not missed, as much as we have to look at the academic side as well. School personnel is important because, you know, even if we had a model where we had our students back, we have to also make sure that our staff are back safely as well. And whether there's, you know, ongoing discussions around students being carriers of the virus and staff being vulnerable, there's a lot of truths to all of this that have to be balanced. And so how do we open school in a way that's safe for everybody, staff included? And so these are ongoing conversations that we're having with the Framingham Teachers Association, the Framingham Administrators Association, and others as we work in partnership with that. Certainly there's provisions into the law that are shown in this slide, which would allow for exemptions. And again, we're trying to do the best we can to accommodate everyone's needs, and to the extent we can accommodate interests, we'll look at that as well. Professional development, an area here, just wanted to call this out in the slide. We're going to be focusing on an anti-racism focus. We have an equity audit presentation coming up in early August. But in addition to the professional development needs for our schools, is looking at how we integrate technology, how we really move curriculum forward using all the technology tools that we have. And so there'll be a lot of professional development need to start this school year. I anticipate the commissioner will be, although this is not in writing yet, I anticipate the commissioner will likely have a lesser than 180-day school year. I'm hearing anywhere from 177 days, perhaps to more, then that is intended to have time for staff to come back to have professional development, to come back and reacquaint with the work in the buildings, and to allow that sort of preparation for the school year. Again, nothing final on that. I'm waiting to see some more information. Perhaps this morning I'll know more. Academics, there's been some questions around this. As I mentioned earlier, this is we were in this sort of crisis learning mode of just, and again, we thought we'd be out for a couple of days, then a week. And so it was, well, let's just keep doing what we've been doing. We'll deepen the content knowledge. It's clear to us, it's clear that, you know, to everybody, I think, that we need to move forward. We can't be continuing in a cycle of just repeating the previous year's work. So there's going to be this drive forward, and we're going to have to make sure we're successful. We're going to have to make sure that students are engaging and we have that data to look at, which isn't great. And so we need to make sure that we make it great. We make sure that our families, that our students are engaging, and that there's real-time instruction to the extent that we can do that. Being mindful too that the teachers have to learn this, and how do we manage a school day of different grades, of different needs in different spaces. So, but the bottom line here is that we need to move our curriculum forward, and it won't be the sort of traditional calendar that the families have become accustomed to with parents. Although parents are the primary educator for their child, we know we need to do something differently if we're going to continue in a remote fashion. So more to come on certainly on curriculum and schedules and learning time and how that will look. Again, the whole idea for the DESE plan was to have this continuum. So on the one end, you have a full in-person experience, which as I pointed out before, is unlikely at this time and not a recommendation of mine. To the other end of the pendulum that swings, which is a full remote. And that would allow us for, if you had a situation where a number of cases had increased, for example, the school might have to go to an immediate closure. So you'd have to be nimble to then go back into a full remote. So the hybrid really is the best of both of those options. It allows you a plan if and when we come back. And it also allows you a specific plan for full remote. And so that's why we're leaning in that direction. The hybrid would account for both extremes of the pendulum. Again, we're going to continue to use the platforms that we have, as I mentioned here. We want to prioritize, it's been an interesting conversation in recent days, and I want to call it out publicly. We have talked about our students in particular who are most vulnerable, most at risk, students, in my view, who've not been served well through the COVID-19 time out of school, particularly students with disabilities, students who require language support, which is often better or necessarily done in person. And that has not been served well in a remote environment. So we are looking at how do you prioritize bringing back students in small groups. Once we know it's safe, once we've seen whether or not there's spikes in communities, we can begin to explore that. We have the buses, we have the transportation to start bringing students back in small scale. It does beg another question though, because when the students do come back, that means the teachers of those students need to come back. And so we're going to be putting teachers for the first time in direct contact with students. And so begins the challenge of which students do we bring back, which teachers do we bring back, and how do we manage that? So these are ongoing conversations with our Teachers Association. We want to be cooperative and collaborative as we've been throughout this process. And I want to just give a shout out to Chris Mulroney, the FTA president, and to Lori Brockway, and to Emily Beattie, Barbara Connery, for the FTA, Jeff Convery, LaFonso Ariano, and Colin Confoy on the Framingham Administrators Association, and trying to work as collaboratively as we can as we work through a lot of the details here. Communication, this is about coming on my last slide here before I turn it over to questions, again, the intention is it's not perfect, it's not flashy, and it's not really polished. It's more just an honest update as to what I know today. And again, this is a recorded session. At 4 o'clock today, the information, I'm not working from a script. I often don't, which means that this will be slightly different at 4 o'clock today. And to the extent you want to hear more of me, you can come back and tune in. If I have new information, I'm going to share it. I'm not going to just hold out because this first session didn't have it, because they will be recorded sessions. I will provide the updates. So it's very possible that 4 o'clock today could be the same information. And it's very possible that 4 o'clock today could have some new updates that I've not been able to share with you this morning. So that's the intention. That's the disclaimer up front. The plan now is on Wednesdays at 10:30 and 4 o'clock. That's today and then for next Wednesday. And we're going to evaluate that though to see whether or not it makes sense to do a different time, as I mentioned earlier, that works better for families. The idea is that you can tune in, and if you can't, you can catch it as a recorded session. And also questions and answers that do come up, just to restate that, will be posted on our website. So if you do miss a session, you're on vacation, you found some place to go that's not your house, and that good for you, by the way, if that happens, then you can go back and check the questions and answers. There'll be school-specific information that will be coming, because for many of you, as much as you want to hear from me about the district's concerns, you really want to hear how this is going to impact your child at your child's school. And that can't come until we have the district plan in play. But know that we've been meeting with principals every single day, and principals have been developing their plans. And when that time comes, they will be the primary conduit in communicating with you as well. Again, as far as communication goes, we're doing our best. If we can do better, suggest how, and we'll do everything we can to be as effective communicators as possible through all of this. The back to school plan will be presented. It will be, I believe, it will be made public to you by the weekend. By Friday, we have our school committee packets that are distributed. So by late Friday, you should be able to see what I expect, somewhere between 50 and 100-page document that will go through a lot of the details in much more precise detail than I have here. Again, it's a draft. It's not a final document. It is a plan. The school committee will discuss that at their next meeting on the 29th, and I hope I have that date right. And then on the 31st, the plan is due, and so we'll go from there. The conversations around the homeschool connectivity, we're still working on the live video streaming and providing this interpretation. I hope is making this accessible to everybody. So I'm going to stop there and go to some questions and see what we have in the chat. The idea here is not to keep you on the call longer than need be, but if there's questions, I'll take the time to respond. If I don't have the answers, I'll tell you that too, and I'll make sure I get back to you with those answers. So I'm going to just pull up my question screen and see what we have. I hope it was helpful. Again, I went a little longer than I thought on the initial introduction here. Okay, give me 1 second. Okay, so the first question that I'm seeing on the chat was will remote learning be actual teaching this year or more what we call busy work? So I think I addressed that already in the slide presentation. But to be clear, the intention here is to move the curriculum forward. If we're going remote at first, how is the district getting technology out to students in a timely manner? So I'm going to just pause so our interpreters can translate this in real time. When we rolled out the Chromebooks initially, the challenge there was we were working ahead of basically a full-on closure by the governor's directive. And so we had a weekend or so to get technology out as broadly as we could to families and students, particularly who didn't have anything at home to access. So that included Chromebooks and hotspots and so forth to access the internet. Trying to slow my pace with the interpreters. What's different here is that we expect that we will schedule appointments with families that allow for the social distancing. And our idea right now is that we would give a chance for students to connect with their teacher and also a chance to distribute technology and make sure that students can log in, that they have access to Wi-Fi, and if not, that we can leverage our resources to make sure that students have what they need at home to access in a full remote environment. So it's quite a bit different than the previous effort. The next question is around related to the technology. It says, can you please discuss the platform and expectations for remote learning? Asks, will all teachers be unified in both platform and expectations? Will it be like a regular school day, all live, but just online? Will it just be a few live lessons per week and maybe recorded? So this is a great question. This is what we're discussing right now. What I don't want to do is make a promise to you that that I have to now bargain for teachers. So this needs to be a collaborative conversation. But I can tell you, based on the discussions we've been having around reopening, that this is a shared interest. Teachers have become, those who were reluctant perhaps at first have become much more adept at using the platforms that they've been using. We typically, as a Google district, we've been using Google as a medium. There's been some use of Canvas, which is another back-end platform that we use at the secondary level. So there's discussions around all these questions, and we'll make sure we spell that out in the return to school plan, because this is asked for by the department as well. So again, to the extent, in my perfect world, this is just Bob Tremblay's view on the world. I'd love to see, basically a teacher who's teaching in his or her class, and students can just tune in from home, like you're doing here, and see it in real time and participate in real time. But it's oversimplified. There's challenges to that. What about if there's multiple children in a home? How do they do that? You have to make sure there's a number of devices and the bandwidth. And so there's a lot of logistics that have to be worked through. But that's my ideal of that, and how close we can get to that will be an ongoing conversation. So, but it's going to be more, the expectation is that it's more than just a series of links and pre-recorded lessons. We know we have to do something different than that, and our teachers understand that too. This question here, can you please address the rumor that FPS is seriously considering remote learning for September and October with reevaluation in November? With so many states cases on the rise, it would behoove us to begin remotely. So yeah, I mean, I'll try to dispel the rumor right here. I think I've said it already, and this question came earlier. Our intention is to begin full remote. Whether that's September and October with a full hybrid kind of, cohort, one group on for a week, one group off for a week by November, that still needs to be worked out. The state continues to press, just to be clear, for a full in-person return. Unless that's changing this morning, that's still the directive. So districts that have moved in a different direction to do something other than that are either doing it perhaps in defiance, or doing it because they've sort of tested this and it's just not going to work. And that's the case in our view in Framingham. So yeah, rumor mill addressed. The intention is that we start remote, and the question is, what day will that be? And so we're working toward that, but that will be a recommendation. That is not exactly the plan yet. That will have to be supported, whatever plan, supported by the school committee and by the city's Department of Public Health. And so as we watch the trends of what's happening with cases and what we've come to understand about the virus, we're making safety obviously the number one priority. That's going to be what drives all of this, even though it may be imperfect. So that's the rumor mill. The intention is to, the other thing we looked at too is trying to find out like clear demarcation lines as to when it makes sense to call the next phase. You know, I used this in a meeting the other day as an example. When you knew that beaches, for example, would be reopening to some extent, you knew to look forward to it. You knew if things went well in phase 1 and phase 2 that you could look forward to phase 3. What we don't want to do is be in a situation of saying, well, sometime in the future, children will start coming back to school. The danger with that is that it forces you to put a precise date or a time stamp on that. And what if you're not? What if you're planning around it? So we're going to take the school year and divide it into 1/6. And the reason for that is we have some schools that operate in quarters and some schools that operate in trimesters or semesters. So we're trying to find these sort of clear demarcation points across the school year where we can say, okay, we've achieved whatever we want to call it, the first 6 or the first phase. And now we can go on to, so if we were to think of it this way, your first phase would be up until say October, that would be a full remote. Then you would evaluate, and at that point you could evaluate, a lot of information will change between August and October to determine how you'd proceed at that next benchmark. And maybe you say in October, we're going to come back in a hybrid approach, we're ready. Or, you know what, the cases have spiked and the indication is that it's not safe, it's going to be remote continued until this third benchmark. And maybe at that point, who knows, maybe there's a vaccination, maybe everyone's vaccinated and we're back in person, and that's the planning. It's very difficult to predict the future as much as I would like to do that. So we will continue to provide those sort of benchmarks along the way so you know what to expect. And again, I think with the regular communication like this will hopefully be a help to leave out the guesswork. What accommodations can be made for students on IEPs where remote or distance learning is of lower effectiveness than the general student population? Is anyone looking at staggered returns depending on the needs of students? Yeah, I mentioned that before. We absolutely are. We understand that there's a lot of IEPs that are not being met right now, 504 plans that are not being met, and so we have to address that. But in doing so, that means that some staff come back and some staff start working with students. And you know, if we're saying that it's not safe to do that for everybody, is it safe to do that for some? And that's the part that we have to reconcile. So the intention, the philosophical underpinning of that question is, yes, we know that students who have the greatest need demand and deserve the greatest attention. But who provides that and in what mechanism needs to be a conversation that happens together with our teachers and not as a directive. So there's logistics to that go beyond just the student in this case, that we have to factor in, you know, the risk to staff safety of bringing staff in who may be vulnerable as well. Are there arrangements for parents for essential workers so their students can attend school full time? You know, we can certainly look at that. It's a good question. I'm going to keep these and we'll process those and see if I can come up with some answers. I'm not going to promise that I'm going to have answers to all these questions today. I'll do my best though. Bear with me as I read and talk and monitor Zoom at the same time. And by the way, you know, people can be pretty critical. So if you think this is going all right, you know, that feedback would be helpful too. If the volume's not good, the camera's not good, you know, this is the first run. So your feedback is really appreciated, even if it's not harshly critical. Even good feedback about, hey, good job, good try, good first effort, you know, that goes a long way too. But let us know if there's things that technically that could be improved. We want to make this the best it possibly can be. This is from a teacher. Just how questions in the chat are being handled for this week, next week's sessions. Will they be addressed? And if so, how will your responses be disseminated to staff and families? The whole idea of the webinar is that I found that it's getting very tricky to communicate to varieties of audiences and in the right order at the right time. You know, if I communicate something, if I get information, I communicate it to staff, families are finding, some staff members are families, so there's already a discrepancy of who knows information at what time. And so the idea is that this is a one-stop shop. So whether it's a member of the community, someone who's interested in just following Framingham, or it's a staff member, administrator, a student, whomever, this is available to everybody at these set slots of the day. So the information will be provided in a Q&A document that will be on the website. And again, the recording of the session will be available on the website. So that's how we're going to be getting the information back. And so I would encourage you just to check in those locations. And I'll work with our team to see about dissemination. I'm trying to avoid giving too much information in too many different formats. So for example, offering this webinar with live interpretation and live Q&A opportunity seems to me as a really solid two-way engagement strategy. For me to provide you just an update in writing doesn't allow you to ask clarifying questions or to engage back. So I'm trying not to inundate families and staff with too much information, but just to be, you know, talking to you as I know it. And I'm hoping that this is the preferred medium for you as well. But there will be something in writing to follow up on all of these. How can we guarantee schools have proper PPE, cleaning supplies, tissues? The public are having a hard time finding these. So the schools, they have the good fortune of working through a procurement process that is sort of selective for schools. So we started this process of securing proper PPE a while back. And so the number is pretty staggering. You know, the PPE changes, you know, that we have, again, we're grateful to the commission, the Disability Commission, on providing us with some face coverings that allow for transparent viewing of the face, but also we have enough PPE to accommodate. We'll be asking students and staff obviously to bring their own face coverings each day, but should they be lost or, you know, things will happen. We have enough replacements to accommodate all of our students. Cleaning supplies have been procured, so we're taking care of all of that. There's a question here about the compensatory services for special education students. So this is something we're taking up. There's ongoing guidance, including this week, I believe tomorrow, with Russell Johnston. Russell Johnston's the Associate Commissioner and focuses on special education. And so these questions have no doubt come up as services that have been missed, and how do you make up for that? What services can we provide for students on IEPs in a remote fashion? Which services need to be provided in person? So we'll make sure we address that question in our follow-up plan. Kindergartners, preschool be required to wear masks. Although the law doesn't require it, or however that's being characterized, whatever the rules may be from grade 2 up in Framingham, I'm asking the Board of Health and the school committee to support the requirement of masks for all students. As it stands right now, students who are being transported, all students who are on a bus will be required to wear. That is a requirement. Coming to school, however, under grade 2 is not required. However, we will be requiring that in Framingham. I'll be asking for the support of the school committee, again, the Board of Health, to support that. And again, it's just a best practice. I mean, there's debates, of course, on masks and how people feel about them and the value. And you know what? Okay, I get that. But here we have to deal with the safety of masses of people. 10,000, 12,000 people is a big deal. And we're not seeing those kinds of groups coming together anywhere. And, you know, everything is, you know, at certain percentages of capacities and with 6-foot distancing. And if you throw all that out the window and say we can come back at 3 feet and take your mask off, I don't want to be the community that experiments with that, frankly. So I'm asking for your cooperation in understanding that wearing the mask is for the safety of everybody else around you as much as it is for your own. Bear with me as I read the questions. How would just the substantially increased opportunity for virus transmission that will occur under the hybrid model as children alternate between the school environment and childcare environments and off weeks? You know, we have to make some effort to bring students back in a hybrid model. Again, that's not proposed until late fall. And hopefully at that point, we'll have some data that suggests to us that cases are declining. If it's not the case, then we're not going to put safety at risk. So we're going to have to monitor that. The idea of an A and a B or a cohort is keeping the same groups of students together, so that you're minimizing the amount of movement and sort of bringing one group in contact with another group to the extent possible. So you'll see a lot of likely students staying in their classrooms, and specialists, for example, moving to classrooms as opposed to students moving up and down hallways. So minimizing movement through the school is a central element to the plan that we're considering here. This is in any model with remote or hybrid. At the high school, there'd be instructor-led classes. So again, we're working with the teachers to roll out as a robust as possible system. I mean, you're seeing this in colleges where you have you have a professor that may be providing the class in person if you can attend, or if the limitations allow, depending on the school, depending on the country, and then students who are not able to be in that for whatever reason, or can't be or choose not to be, can participate and access the same content in a virtual world. We're becoming more adept at that. I mean, I've never had a webinar like this in my career, and yet I've become much more adept at using a camera and sitting, in my house and having this communication. So as we become more comfortable with the technology, this becomes just more institutionalized behavior. So we will hopefully, our teachers will feel the same, and be able to start moving toward instructor-led classes. Again, the idea of just having resources and having links and videos that may have served some for some time, but it's not going to serve all for the future. And we need to think about how we do that with much stronger going forward from what we've been doing. It's got to be a complete mind shift here. Coming into our last 10, 13 minutes or so, I'm just going through the questions as I see them. There's probably more questions that I can get to. It's like we're up to like 13 pages of questions, so I'll do my best. Maybe I'll try to move more quickly through these. When we get notice as what the model will look like, work schedules, meetings, calendars already filling up. I understand, there's sort of mixed things, right? Yesterday we read that the MIAA is saying that we're gonna have a sports season, after September 14th, but yet we haven't figured out how to bring kids generally to school in the summer. And so I have some reservations about the reality of that September 14th fall schedule. I'm a parent too, and I get things from my kids about signing up for soccer season. And I ask myself, is this like really a thing? You're gonna have to be patient. The timing of it is August. We're asked to give a plan to the state. And I think that the lag on that is intended to be so that we have more information about the virus, about what districts are doing. And you're going to start to see school districts making decisions. Framingham may well lead the way, who knows? But you're going to start to see decisions being made that's going to be divisive. Districts that choose to come back in person are going to be, there's going to be some at odds with districts that are choosing to go full remote, or parents whose work schedules are going to be compromised, or there's going to be job loss, right? I mean, these are things that we're worried about. Or kids, because parents have to make ends meet. We understand that there's going to be potentially children at home pacing themselves, learning in their own house alone. That's not what we want. So, how do you be all things to all people? You just can't. And so we're going to do my best to communicate with everybody as I have the information as often as possible, so that you can plan for plan A, plan B, and so forth. I promise to do my best to communicate what I know to you as I know it, and as these plans evolve. I cannot promise you that I will come up with a plan with our team that makes everybody happy. I just know that's not going to be possible. But we're all facing the same virus situation together, and we're all trying to work that out as best we can. So I will apply this, I will provide the information as often as I possibly can, so you can plan for childcare options. And when I think about school cancellations, I don't always get it right. I mean, I try, and I try to let you know, the day ahead, so that you can plan for childcare, or let your office know that you're going to be in late, or whatever it may be. I try. And so this is much more, this is like trying to forecast a school cancellation 2 years from now. I just can't. But as I have information, I will be sure to share it with you. The emergency ALICE drills, how will they happen now to socially distance? This is a great question. I'm gonna bring these back. You still have to be ready, and God forbid, in the event of an active shooter, yeah, this does apply. So we're going to have to just obviously prioritize and think about safety in every aspect of what we do. There's this is about contact tracing. Just come up. So things that are more medically specific that will come up around, when a teacher is, if a teacher or a student or, if, should come into contact with somebody, the contact tracing requirements around that. That's all pretty well spelled out in some detail. And so this plan will we'll have that written out for you as well. And in a subsequent update, I may invite a guest to to share the microphone with me and just give you some updated information around some of these topics. I'm going to just continue to read. Bear with me. Again, this is a push for more teacher-led instruction versus Google Slides. Again, we'll do our best to go through and respond to all these questions. There are a lot of them. There are now 14 pages. How would you deal with siblings in different grades regarding on-off weeks? Who possibly request they attend the same on or off week? Yeah, absolutely. We're coming at this with a lens that is hopefully as family-friendly as possible. That's sensitive to the fact that if you have multiple children, that you might be able to get a week off of work or working from home. You might not, but if you can, that'll be really difficult if you have to have one child home one week and another child home another week. And so we're going to be sensitive to that. So we're running these models now based on this sort of return to school, which will happen ideally late fall. And then we would see what the modeling looks like to make sure we can, keep families together as cohorts, but also to provide transportation. So that's another factor into this. And again, whether we know it's 1/3 or 1/2 of the bus capacity, that's going to have to be factored into this. But we are trying to be sensitive in coming at this from a safety lens and as though we were the parent in your shoes coming at this. And so that's really, really important. So this question, it would be great for kids to come back to school, but what guarantees do we have is our children will be safe? I don't have guarantees. I apologize. I can't guarantee anything. I can only guarantee to share what I know and that we're going to be continued to led by the science. We have a really exceptional director of public health in working with Dr. Wong. We follow guidance from industry information that Dr. Wong provides to us. We'll do the best we can. I can't promise that if families choose to keep their children at home, remote learning, because they don't feel that the interaction in person is safe. In that case, families retain that right. Families may continue to keep their children at home, and school will continue to provide that remote learning experience that moves the curriculum forward. So that option is always retained by a parent. It's like a snow day. You may feel like, well, this school day today is not safe for my child to walk to school, and I would understand that. And so as a parent, you should do what you need to do as a parent to make sure your child is safe. And so that might mean keeping your child at home from school that day. That's okay. In this case, the attendance piece is, there's going to be a lot of forgiveness, which is a challenge at the same time, because we know that in order for students to actually make forward progress, they need to engage, they need to attend school. But how do you ensure engagement? And how do you ensure attendance if students are at home? And so there are challenges that come with this very imperfect model. And so but as far as guarantees, I won't pretend that I can offer that. And actually headed off the attendance question, which followed. These are great questions, and there's a little shout out here. So this is, again, I'm hoping it's helpful. Blocks, yes, so blocks will follow the same procedures. We consider the blocks preschool to be a Framingham public school. And again, you'll hear from Rosie Alvarez directly as we come up and zero in on our plan. There'll be a lot of questions that you have that may be building specific questions, and those will be answered by the building principals. Some of these are duplicate questions about teacher-led classes versus videos. Is there any chance that parents can opt in to have the child attend full-time? We can look at that. I don't see that option being able to be accommodated, because we have to consider the 6-foot distancing And if we're having a classroom that we have in this cohort, it creates a challenge because the cohort is no longer pure. We're trying to keep the cohort so that we have a minimal crossover among cohorts. So keeping a child attending full-time could be problematic. I'm not saying no to that, though. There could be instances where a child does attend full-time, and that may be a child who, in particular, who demonstrates as someone, in our view, who's a high-need student for whom, anything but a full-time instructional model, perhaps a student on an IEP as an example, anything short of that would really be a disservice. And I know that this is not, again, we would like to accommodate every child in person. That's the way that we should do this. It's just not possible to do that. We don't have the facility space to do that, and we can't ensure safety to the extent that we can even ensure safety. We certainly can't do that if we brought everybody back. So there may be instances where children would be asked to come in person all the time, but that would be the exception, not the rule. IEP reevaluations and those kinds. I know there's meetings that are happening in virtual environments. That's been happening, so that will likely continue. There may be some in-person meetings that are happening with social distancing. Many of our offices have returned back to an in-person experience as well. So more to come on some of those very sort of specific questions. The one here's a compliment about the leadership and the open communication. Thank you for that. And then it goes on to say, I've not heard discussions about possibilities to leverage parents and the community in supporting education and educators. Part of this is a mixed, in my own view on this, because part of it is, well, the educators are looking to the schools and the administrators to do their job and tell us how they're going to educate going forward. A lot of this has been very prescriptive, though, from the department. In fact, it's been a little less, honestly, prescriptive than we thought it would be. We expected it would be about 85% directed as to what we would have to do, and about 15% where districts had some latitude to make some localized decision making. And what it seems to me, again, I have a call with the commissioner in just a few minutes, is that it seems to be the other way. And so there will be a time, and we will. So this is an effort to engage the community in the conversation. We've had a lot of ideas that parents have put forward that have been great, and we've saved those, and we have a kind of a clearinghouse of that information. That continue to do that. I mean, this is a problem that we can work to solve as a community, and so the fact that we have not reached out to parents or community stakeholders broadly is not reflective of that we don't want to hear you. It's more, we need to first understand what we're expected to do in school, and that's still a question. I mean, I'm going to be honest again, folks. The directive here is to open school in person at 3 feet. If that holds true, this conversation is for nothing. That's an important point, and so we're pushing back on that to say, well, we will bring students back in person to the extent that we can when we feel it's safe to do so, and provided that our school committee and our Board of Health agree. So that's a different position. And so for me to then now begin to solicit input from the community as to how we should sort of do school could be an effort in futility. I need to wait until it's clear to us where the center of decision making lies. And that continues to evolve each day. So there will be ample opportunity. This is one example of where you can provide information that helps to inform our planning. But again, we'll continue to reach to our community, to our community partners. I can't say enough about working with our division heads, community partners who've been. I'm on a call. The mayor invites me on a call each Monday, Wednesday, Friday to join with department heads and division heads across the city as we work through all these challenges together. So I'm grateful for that opportunity, and so we are partnering there. And again, for now, please view this two-way engagement with our families as an effort to hear you and put suggestions in the chat, put suggestions in the Q&A document, and there's a chance to input there. We may have already thought of some of those ideas. Staff are working around the clock thinking about this as well, and we'll continue to read your ideas and see what we can integrate. We've learned an awful lot from our community, from our parents, and I'm appreciative of that. We're coming up on our last minute here, so there's no way I'm going to be able to scroll through the next 16 or so pages of questions. So it seems to me that this is probably was probably time well spent, since there's a lot of questions and a lot of engagement. And I want to thank everybody for taking the time to be part of this first ever webinar that I've ever done in my career. And I hope you view it as helpful as I wanted it to be. And if not, let us know how we can do it better. So my thanks to everybody for being on the call today and for joining us. And again, I'll be back on. I have a call with the commission now, but I'll be on again at 4 o'clock today with either a similar or new information. And then again next Wednesday. So thanks very much, everybody. And I appreciate you joining me today. Stay well, stay healthy, continue to stay patient with us. And I hope to see you in person sometime really soon. Thanks.